It is time to welcome Derek Gerberich to the line here on the Villanova Basketball Report. Derek Gerberich has begun and was the innovator behind Stathouse Analytics, an analytics-based college basketball website that breaks down the game in the way really nobody else does. And these are next-level advanced statistics that he has going on, and it's really going to cause you to look at the entire game of basketball in a different way. I don't know how better to compliment a guy, so we'll bring him on with that. Derek Gerberich, thanks for coming on with us. It is a real pleasure, and we're looking forward to being schooled by your basketball acumen here tonight.
I appreciate it, Bob. I don't know if I'd be so kind myself, but do appreciate the introduction. Always good to chat with you.
Well, you're always a modest man, so somebody has to do it. You have begun this website and really hit the ground running. I see you posting a lot on Twitter, and that's at Jerry Stathouse. And it's not just about Division I basketball. Division II, Division III. As you know, Derek, I call a lot of Swarthmore basketball. So when I see something come up on the ticker about the Centennial Conference, you know that I'm taking a hard look at it. Could you walk us through the genesis of how you came up with this, what you see as the market, and and where you're going from here?
Yeah, some big questions. But in terms of the genesis of it all, it really dated back to the time that I got to spend with Penn State's basketball team. I was there studying statistics and was given an opportunity to work with their analytics. And so a lot of the player combination, a lot of the how are different lineups performing on the court, and what are we seeing? How can we better quantify what we're actually seeing out there? Really had its roots in that program. And as we started to try and make the data easier to pull, we realized, we could take this and span it across not only Division I men, but I think some of the other neglected divisions out there, Division II, Division III men and women, where there, in my opinion, just a bigger need for some of those stats. So that's sort of the genesis for it all. And in terms of the market and who we see using the website, it really does range. We have just diehard fans in there that really want to go an extra level deep on their favorite team. We have quite a number of coaches and various assistant coaches across programs across the country that are in there using it. And we've actually seen it a little bit in the media as well, with some beat writers wanting to add a little bit of extra flavor to their articles and the games that they're covering. So I'd say those would be the three main segments right now.
Now, you mentioned when we chatted off air about the adjusted plus-minus statistic and the fact that came from your time at Penn State. Very much a leading indicator of actually perhaps the lagging indicator. I don't know. You can tell me. In terms of really evaluating player performance, could you tell us a little bit more about where that came from and how that came about?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone, I guess, who would be following Penn State basketball or remotely familiar with Penn State basketball, there's been a lot of teams that were heavily dependent upon a singular player, right? So great players in the line of Penn State, Taylor Battle, Tim Frazier, DJ Newbill. And so looking at individual plus-minus for some of those guys didn't quite cut it for us. Essentially, if a Tim Frazier is playing 39 minutes a game, his plus-minus is basically going to be whatever the end result of the game was. And if we're in Big Ten play and we're 6-12, he's always going to be a minus at the end of the day. But where adjusted plus-minus came from is, well, why do we have to play a player like Frazier all the time? It's because when he's not on the floor, things are going bad. And so that's what adjusted plus-minus tries to capture, is taking the plus-minus per minute when a player is on the court and then subtracting the plus-minus per minute when they're off the court to get a sense of not only what are they doing for the team when they're out there, but also what's happening when they go to the bench.
That's a really interesting statistic there, an interesting concept, and obviously makes a lot of sense. And I think you had a pretty nice set of subjects, right or wrong, good or bad, when it came to Penn State with Tim Frazier, DJ Newbill, and then prior to when you got there, but the history lives on with Taylor Battle. So it makes a lot of sense that that's where something like that would manifest, and it's an unbelievably useful statistic. Now, if I can move this to the Villanova side, I have a question about some of the graphics that you've sent us, and we're going to put them up on the screen as we have this conversation. You mentioned a difference in assists when Jermaine Samuels versus Demir Cosby-Roundtree are on the floor. My question there is, and I know you're probably not saying that this is the case, but it probably has something to do with Jermaine Samuels playing on the outside, on the perimeter, spacing the floor, versus Cosby-Roundtree, who doesn't have an outside game, is in the middle of the floor, and then so the floor is a little bit more bunched. Because when I look at assist numbers, they actually average the exact same amount of assists per game, which is, I think, less than one, if I'm not mistaken. Cosby-Roundtree plays 6 more minutes per game, 21 versus 15. Again, maybe a little bit of a difference there. But my question is, what would you attribute that statistic to, since you had mentioned that was something that caught your eye about this Villanova team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on there, Bob. It really what that assist number across a lineup of 5 is trying to capture is how are they playing as a unit. And it can be, how are they moving the ball as a unit? How are they playing together? And it can be something like you just called out, right? Maybe it's better floor spacing when Samuels is in the game and things aren't as clogged up. And of course that leads to more offensive assist opportunities. We also see it, just with guys they're always going to be in the right place at the right time. They're always going to be, setting the best screens. The ball isn't stuck on them in opportune times when it comes their way. So maybe outside of just this was a direct assist from X player, it's how many assists is this offense generating, and trying to get a better sense of how well they're functioning as a unit.
I think a lot of my questions, Derek, are going to revolve around Jermaine Samuels for this Villanova basketball team, because you have him very highly rated across a wide variety of spectrums. Pascal has the highest plus-minus, but he plays, a ton of minutes. Samuels, second on the team in less than half of the minutes logged for Eric Pascal in terms of that plus-minus. I don't know how best to put it, so I'm just going to put it as bluntly as I can. He makes a lot of dumb plays out there, at least visually. It looks at times like he gets ahead of himself, turns the ball over, et cetera, et cetera. Against Xavier, he dribbled the ball 1 step into the front court and threw it to a guy who was 3 steps behind him into the back court. I mean, there are things that drive Villanova fans absolutely berserk about Jermaine Samuels, but we all acknowledge the talent he has. I don't know if you can answer that question. That's half a vent and half a question. But what drives Jermaine Samuels being right near the top of all these metrics?
Yeah, and I'd certainly say I hear your vent. Well, definitely. It's always good to get a perspective of what you guys are seeing compared to these numbers. I'd say at the end of the day, what these numbers are looking at is what's happening on the scoreboard in Big East play. And right now, Villanova is winning the games, and they're outscoring their opponents more often than not when he's on the floor. The offense is flowing better. So I probably encourage you to maybe look outside of maybe the one play that really irks you, and take a more holistic approach to what is actually happening in the win-loss column, the plus-minus column at the end of the day when he's on the floor, and see if anything else catches your eye.
Yeah, no, and certainly that's something that I will look at and take into much more consideration as we go through the rest of the season, because seeing something like that, it's just one of those things that takes you back and makes you think about something a little bit differently. The only other thing that they'll bring up, I guess it's every single statistical category now that we're going to talk about with with Samuels, but the difference in rebounding. When the alternative, at least as I saw it, was Demir Cosby-Roundtree on the floor. So Cosby-Roundtree averages 6.3 rebounds per game. Samuels 4.8. I mentioned earlier the difference in minutes. That's give or take about the same number of rebounds per game, per minute, I should say, per player. So what do you think drives that difference? Is it something just about Samuels' bringing the best out of the other players on the team, because I would call Cosby Roundtree the best rebounder on the team.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's very similar to how we were trying to approach the assist there. But if you look at the top 4 lineups that Jay Wright has been using in Big East play, and you just look at the rebound differential for those groups so far, the lineup that has Samuels in it is the only one that's positive, and noticeably so. With him out of the game right now, those other lineups all have a negative rebound differential, even with Cosby Roundtree in there. Now, maybe you're saying that the ball just has bounced the wrong way a couple of times, and we might see those numbers change as Big East play goes on. But what it's really trying to get at is how is the team rebounding collectively as a unit? Maybe Cosby Roundtree is a great individual rebounder, but chasing a rebound at all costs and causing a lost an offensive rebound on the backside where he might have been. You don't know. I'd have to watch more in-depth film there to kind of try and match up these numbers. But it's really trying to say how will they function as a unit, rebounding as a collective.
Of course, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it's just, I love these discussions. I love getting in deep and trying to understand these numbers. And I know you know this as well as anybody, because you were asked to put it to work while you worked under Pat Chambers, and now you do it all the time with what you do here. Numbers tell a story. It's something you might not have considered, but then obviously finding the drivers behind it is where the real fun comes in. And that's what I have had a lot of fun looking over these numbers, preparing for this interview and getting ready to talk to you. I guess my next question related to Villanova would be, Phil Booth is 4th in this plus minus, and this is something where he plays a vast majority of the minutes, and I think you mentioned these numbers are in Big East play. So this highest plus minus, Eric Paschal, then Jermaine Samuels, then Colin Gillespie, then Phil Booth. When we talked to you on Monday night at halftime of the LaSalle basketball game, we talked a little bit about Villanova changing their offensive philosophy and putting Colin Gillespie off the ball, putting Phil Booth more as a point guard. And that is, I think, not seeing the numbers, but I think it's improved their efficiency. It's certainly improved their winning percentage on a small sample size basis, and has allowed Colin Gillespie to flourish off the ball, though I don't think he's a bad point guard by any sense. He can be very successful in that role too. I don't know if you have a way to track something like this, but we believe here at the Villanova Basketball Report that Phil Booth has been taking shots that are of a higher difficulty than anybody else on the Villanova team, and yet, since Big East play has started, has been very efficient, and that's kind of why Jay Wright has moved to that system. I think there's a concern, though, that at some point those shots aren't going to fall because they are a high degree of difficulty and everybody's keying on Booth, but right now it's actually the most efficient offense. So there's a lot to unpack there on that statement slash question, but I would ask your thoughts on it.
Thoughts on just Villanova's offensive efficiency with Booth on the floor right now?
Yeah, with Booth on the floor, he's 4th as it stands right now in your plus minus. But I also see him as the key driver to whether Villanova wins or loses a basketball game right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something as simple as minutes played would also confirm that too, where, Jay Wright is saying Paschal and Booth have to be in the game at all times. Out of first 5 games you're looking at, they're on the floor all but 10 or 15 minutes between the two of them. In terms of actually the nitty-gritty between the numbers there, we have when Phil Booth is on the court, right now, Villanova's offense is operating at a 1.04 points per possession. I think certainly in a winnable range if they could keep up that pace in Big East play. On the other side, the thing that's interesting to me, and I don't know if you have up also the adjusted plus minus, Bob.
Let me grab that, yeah.
But Booth isn't necessarily rated so far in Big East play the most vital player for Villanova to have on the court at all times. and like we talked about earlier, that's measuring what's happening when he's on the court and what's happening when he's off. The big caveat to those numbers is he's only been off the court for 16 minutes in Big East play, so smaller sample size numbers could go a little bit awry there. But what it's telling me is that when he's off the court, it's not an immediate disaster for Villanova. You could potentially afford to get him a few extra minutes of rest as needed, or if some of the shot selection gets too out of control in a certain game, whereas opposed to so far with Pascal, the 10 minutes that he's been off the court, seeing his adjusted plus minus at 1.7 there, and I know I'm getting a little bit sidetracked, tells me that when he's been off the court, it's probably been pretty quick runs in the wrong direction for Nova.
Very, very interesting there. Yeah. No, I'd like to stay on this graphic as well for the time being, because when I look at Joe Cremo now, and I think you mentioned that this is in Big East play, right? You said just the 10 minutes for Pascal. I think this starts to corroborate what we were talking about on Monday night when we mentioned, on our halftime show that you had Joe Cremo on the season as the most efficient player offensively, but we mentioned then that 2 for 13 start in Big East play from beyond the three-point arc and his struggles defensively at any time of the year. And that kind of explains a lot, that negative .479. Cole Swider, I look at him, he hasn't played that many minutes, but when he's been on there, he's struggled. He's been a little bit soft defensively. And then the other name, we can kind of go one by one here, but Javon Quinn is a player who a lot of people here at Villanova want to see on the floor. I'm kind of up in the air. I haven't seen enough from him yet, and I would think that his defense is something that has really cost him in his limited plays on the floor. Again, without looking at the analytics, it seems like he's lost out there and misses assignments. So those three guys, you can start one by one or address all three however you think, but I find that to be really telling, and these adjusted plus minus numbers tell me that I think there's a lot of truth in what these numbers say. Yeah,
sure, absolutely. You can go one by one there, but would echo what you're saying with Cremo. I think a .479 is pretty low, especially for 87 minutes so far. As we did talk about on Monday night, he's been a decent liability defensively according to how the team has played defensively with him in the game. So if the offense also drops out, not surprising for me to see the adjusted plus minus basically saying, hey, when you're playing him, you're losing, and when you're putting him on the bench, that's when you're starting to come back or add to leads. Interesting you call out the Swider there with the 25 minutes. We see this a lot where a team will have somebody who's playing 5-6 minutes a game, and sometimes with that small sample size, if they really are bringing positive contributions in the game, they could have a number similar to Pascal in small minutes and have a really, really high adjusted plus minus. What this tells me, just from looking at the numbers, is not a ton of impact coming into the game and actually probably a bit of a negative impact there. And then Quinterly, as you called out, if we go back to the defensive efficiency numbers that we've been alluding to with him on the floor, you're looking at giving up more than a point per possession. Villanova is while he's in the game. So I would agree with your call out of what might be holding him back from more playing time. Certainly seems to be appearing on the defensive side.
That's very, very interesting there. I'm going to pull that up again if I can. Yeah, the offensive and defensive efficiency. Let's take a look there. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And these graphics, really start to explain the story very, very well. And I find it to be an incredibly interesting discussion to have. So, Derek, I'll ask you this. And once again, this is Derek Gerberich, as you see on your screen from Stathouse Analytics. We'll pull it back to our studio shot here. You can find him at Jerry Stathouse on Twitter and StathouseAnalytics.com. Great insight on Villanova, Derek. Any thoughts that you have about this Villanova team moving forward this season, either from what you've seen or what the numbers tell you. Is this a sustainable pace for a team that's currently unbeaten in the Big East? Are these statistics that would be indicative of a team that could go win a conference?
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. I think from what I've seen in the Big East, it's certainly not going to be easy. It's certainly going to be back and forth, close games, night in and night out, at least in terms of where we come to projecting Villanova games throughout the season. It's a lot of close games, and it usually ends in a lot of close Villanova wins. So that would be my thought for the remainder of the season. In terms of where they're going from here, the one thing I call out that I'd be watching a little bit early, or at least in the next couple of weeks here as Big East play rolls along, is how they're scoring by various possession times. And I think, Bob, that ties in a little bit to what you're talking about with if Booth is taking potentially difficult shots or shots that you wouldn't necessarily recommend. When is that happening in the shot clock, and can we measure an impact on that offensive efficiency as the season goes on? So right now, where I'd say this Villanova team is going is, if you look at how they're scoring the basketball, first 15 seconds of their possession, all time lengths are above 1.1 points per possession. However, most of their possessions, a majority of their possessions, are actually lasting a bit longer than that, and that's where they're slightly less effective scoring the basketball. I'd say, if anything, I look for the Villanova coaching staff to pick up on that, and you might see their game start to be played at a quicker tempo, kind of taking the first good shot that they see come through if they're continuing to score as effectively as they have been.
Incredibly insightful slide that you put together here, because this is something that Villanova fans have been very alert to over the years. Villanova has slowed down the pace in times past. Sometimes it's been very effective. In fact, last year, I know I mentioned when we talked on Monday night that Villanova had the ability to get up and run more last year with the 4 NBA players. They didn't always, and you can probably fact check me on that, but I think that last year's numbers slowed down considerably from the 2016 national championship team, which was interesting, and allowed them to be successful, allowed them to find the extra shot, to figure out, where the openings in the defense were, and to expose those over a 30-second shot clock. And that's something that I think is, I guess, something that I find interesting as we look into this year and what this team's going to be. It's a completely different basketball team. It's a completely different offense. But we have noticed that the possession time has lengthened as well, which can have, good implications. But in this case, you're showing that those shorter possessions can be more efficient, which to an extent makes sense. You're talking about fast break. Fast break is always going to be, you would think, a little bit more efficient than what happens from 25 to 30. But it's still a very enlightening statistic, and I appreciate you giving us a thought on that. And I guess I would close it with this. Any further thoughts to kind of that point, and then generally speaking, anything you wanted to leave us with that we didn't hit over the last 20 or so minutes of this unbelievably great conversation?
Yeah, the only thing I would add on to the previous point there, Bob, is the reason we have those time slots broken down the way we do is you call out fast break. We would say that certainly falls into 0 to 5 seconds. Your secondary break, so maybe if you have a good break, and you don't necessarily get a score immediately, but it opens up something on the counter. That's where you'd see that 5 to 10 seconds coming, and then 10 to 15 seconds is your initial look out of your first set, or what's your first look coming through in the offense that you're running. I'd say those are the 3 areas that Villanova is excelling. So that's how I look at it. And then you have mid-shot clock, late shot clock, and probably a screen and roll or something, whatever your end-of-shot clock offense is at the end. So that would be the only other color I would add to that. And that's always just kind of helpful for us in trying to diagnose how an offense is playing as the season rolls along.
As I mentioned, incredibly insightful, Derek. Appreciate the time. The information for Derek is right behind me. That's at Jerry Stathouse on Twitter, stathouseanalytics.com. You can purchase a membership, as I understand, as well, to kind of unlock all of that amazing content for whatever your favorite team is, or you can evaluate where your team stands in your conference or nationally. The world really is your oyster. Derek, I know I'm going to be continuing to check what you're putting out there on the D3 and Centennial Conference side, and I really appreciate you coming on here tonight. Any parting thoughts that we should be keeping in mind for those of us that are hearing about you tonight and would love to stay more involved with what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Bob. And again, appreciate you having us on. In terms of parting thoughts, what I'd say for anyone who this piques their interest is we love the dialogue. We love the interaction between fans and media members and coaches and people on our site who are going back and forth and saying, hey, I'm really seeing what your numbers are saying here, and it's really cool stuff. Or on the flip side, I haven't seen that, and either I'm going to go look for that now, or I'm still not seeing it. I wonder if we could rework kind of what analytics you're doing there and see if we can make it better. We certainly don't claim to be perfect. We really the hope is we can just start more dialogue with avid basketball fans out there, and hopefully everyone can come to another level of understanding as they're watching their game.
Well, we appreciate that. I know that we have, and everybody watching the show has come to that greater understanding here tonight. And for me, I know it's not done. I'm continuing to kind of churn the wheels in my head on some of the statistics that I've seen. And I appreciate you allowing me to think critically about it in a way that I haven't before. So thank you so much for the time. Congratulations on this amazing venture, and we can't wait to see what's next.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it, and thanks for having us on.
You got it. Absolutely. That's Derek Gerberich from Stathouse Analytics. Thanks to him so much for his time. And now let's get back to the rest of the show.